Welcome everyone to the Buddhist Path of Awakening course. Let's bow in. And tonight we're continuing with the chapter we started last week, having to do with Bodhichitta. What is the name of this chapter? Sorry. Arousing Bodhichitta. And chapter 2 of part 2, Arousing Bodhichitta, the root of the great vehicle. And we are beginning midway through this chapter with the section called Training in the Precepts of the Bodhichitta of Application. The 6 transcendent perfections, or paramitas, the 6 paramitas. This is where we'll start. I'm going to be leading off, and then Michael is going to be finishing. I'm going to cover the first 5 paramitas, and Michael is going to cover the 6th, prajna. Let's see. We have some other co-hosts, I think. Now, let's start off by bringing our minds into the proper space. So if you could take a good meditation posture, or as he says later in this chapter, the 6 or 7 points of posture of Vairochana, the Buddha. You can be seated in a chair, you can be seated on a cushion. One of the main points is to have a good straight spine. He says you might bring your head forward a little bit, just for comfort. Your hands can be in any meditation mudra. It's basically what we do every day. And we bring our awareness right here into this space of the present moment. It helps, I think, to have your eyes open, because this is very natural. We're cultivating the awareness of a Buddha. And Buddhas don't walk around with their eyes closed. They have their eyes open and they have the mind of enlightenment. And that's what we're aspiring to. So our eyes are open, our senses are all open. You might, if you wish, rest your tongue on the roof of your mouth and have your lips slightly parted as you breathe through your nose. Your feet, if you're in a chair, or flat on the floor, it's the usual. And mainly, we are erect, alert, awake, here and now. The posture of the Buddha, Vairochana, or Vairochana. And you bring your mind into this space effortlessly. Any effort only obscures your awareness of this space. We just rest in it. It's already here. We come back to it. This is the fundamental awareness of meditation. It takes you all the way to the end of the path. It just becomes deeper, deeper, more perfect, more profound. We don't need any words to describe it or to give ourselves instructions. And if they do come up, those words, you just let them go, and here we are, looking at our computer screens or whatever it may be that is presenting itself to our eyes, hearing these words as they present themselves to our ears. Now that I mention it, feeling your body wherever it is disposed, and so on. If there's any odor in the room, you can smell it. Any taste in your mouth, you can feel it. And thoughts coming and going as they will. And when they go, they are gone until the next appears. This basically is the fundamental meditation of all Buddhism. It's what leads us into the profound understanding of reality, which goes by many names, but in this instance, for tonight's purposes, we'll talk about emptiness. Shunyata, which in Sanskrit literally means emptiness. Shunya means void or empty. Ta is a nominative, turning it into a noun, so it's emptiness. Empty of what? Empty of any defining thoughts, empty of names, empty of verbs. Completely clear, here, open, awake, aware. Without subject or object, which are just thoughts of I and other, and we let them go, and here it all is. Just this naked, clear, empty of labels, experience. It's even, to call it an experience is unnecessary. It's just continuous this, arising, passing, always continual in its change. This is the fundamental ground of reality. And what we're discussing tonight, the paramitas. Paramita means transcendent virtue. Transcendent, how is it transcendent? Transcends I and other, transcends names, transcends this and that, transcends any concept of existence or non-existence. It's just this, as it is. Paramita. And paramita only lives these transcendent virtues in the realm of shunyata. So what makes this possible for us to discuss this tonight is a beginning understanding, however you understand it, of the entrance into this world of shunyata, this entrance into the world of voidness, of emptiness, of reality, beyond concepts, beyond ideas of this and that, all our idiosyncratic, prejudicial ideas out the window, and there's just utter simplicity, this, naked, empty. This is the world in which the paramitas live. And the entrance to this world is the entrance into the Bodhisattva path. Bodhisattva path, Bodhisattva literally means awakened being. Awakened to what? Awakened to shunyata, to this, to reality, beyond concept, beyond thoughts of I and other. That's what a bodhisattva is, and this is the path of the bodhisattva. The bodhisattva path is divided into 10 stages. In Sanskrit, the word for stage, at this point, you might call it stage, is bhumi. So it's divided into 10 bhumis, 10 individual stages, first through the 10th, the first beginning one through the last. The first bhumi, each bhumi has a name, but we don't really pay too much attention to most of them. But the first bhumi has a very important name, actually. It's in Sanskrit, pra-mudita. Pra means is an intensifier, and mudita means joy. So you might translate the name of the first bhumi as great joy. Why great joy? Because at this stage, the bodhisattva, the person, has become a bodhisattva, great joy, and has discovered emptiness, shunyata, freedom from neurosis, freedom from the anxieties of the relationship between I and other, complete freedom from that, all that baloney out the window, or salami, or whatever you want to call it. And so the bodhisattva has entered into this first bhumi and experienced this great joy. And the paramita that's associated with this bhumi is called generosity. It's like having given up I and other, having given up these false notions, these stories about me and what I need and what I'm afraid of and what I want and all of that and what I don't care about. Then there's tremendous openness, the ability to respond to the things of this world openly, generously, and accurately. And that's called great generosity, dana in Sanskrit. Transcendent generosity. Transcendent, why? Because there's no giver and given. It's just an automatic, constant participation. Everything in the world contributing to everything else, including I, me, what we usually call I and me, which doesn't really exist. Just this thing here, and yours, and everybody else's. So he says generosity can take three forms: material giving, giving the Dharma, and giving protection from fear. Material giving is the most ordinary kind of giving. You give food, wealth, material possessions, and it's important to avoid attitudes of poverty, and it's important to be generous and make offerings to the three jewels, giving to beggars. It's a sort of an opening out, a giving away. He says, generally speaking, the Buddha taught material giving and other practices involving material possessions mainly for lay Buddhists. If you're a monk or nun, the important thing is to simply reduce your desires and learn to be content with what you have. Then there's great giving. This means to give to others something very rare or precious, something precious to you personally. And in the text, remember this is Patrul Rinpoche, 18th century, such as giving your own horse or elephant. I've given my own elephant away many times, or even your own son or daughter. Oh my God, I don't think I've done that. And then there is exceptionally great giving, the third kind. And this refers to making a gift of your own body, limbs, or life. And it says this sort of generosity should be practiced only by a being who has attained at least one of the Bodhisattva levels, preferably one of the more advanced levels. Ordinary beings are incapable of it. This isn't a matter of self-sacrifice or self-punishment. For the moment, mentally dedicating your body, life, and wealth to the benefit of others without attachment, praying that one day you will be capable of actually giving them away. So, this is a tremendous form of generosity. The second gift, having to do with Dana Paramita, is giving the Dharma. Atisha told his disciples that they could work for the good of others by giving Dharma once they had entered the path of seeing. That's what we're talking about here, the path of seeing. Seeing what? Seeing emptiness, seeing shunyata, first bhumi. When you achieve the first bhumi, you are entering the path of seeing. Remember, there are 5 paths. There's the path of preparation, path of accumulation, you're getting yourself ready. And then the third path, boom, you see emptiness, shunyata, it's the path of seeing. The fourth path is the path of meditation, meaning you constantly come back to that seeing of emptiness. And you dwell in it, you live in it, you are aware of it. That's the fourth path, the path of meditation on emptiness. And the fifth path is the path of a Buddha, the path of no more learning. So, you can work for, Atisha told his disciples that they could really work genuinely for the benefit of others once they had entered the path of seeing, once they begin to get a glimpse of what emptiness truly is. They realized emptiness, and he says, and developed clairvoyance. Now remember, this is traditional Tibetan 18th century, 1800s anyhow, 19th century Buddhism, which is a bit different than what we practice today. Trungpa Rinpoche, when he presented all of these ideas in the West, modified it for us to make it more appropriate. Someone who has attained one of the Bodhisattva levels is ready to work for others' benefit. His or her blessings are like the powers of a wish-granting vessel. He or she can bring all beings to maturity without ever running dry. It's effortless because one is embodying this effortless, no I, no other, just being responsive to whatever arises in the present moment. It says, when your own selfish desires have been exhausted, as they are by shunyata, the time will have come to devote yourself entirely to others. And this isn't an idealistic thing. It's like, I'm going to tear off my shirt and give it to somebody else. It's natural. There's nothing else left to do because you've given up the idea of self-aggrandizement, me, I, because it's pointless. It's just painful. It's self-defeating. Then there's giving protection from fear, which is the third one. This means actually doing whatever you can to help others in difficulty. And again, once one is beginning to live in the world of emptiness, shunyata, reality, this becomes natural. It's just simply helping others come into the world of reality that you have begun to inhabit as well. And in that world, there is no purpose for fear. The second virtue is transcendent discipline, shila in Sanskrit. And it means a number of things. The first one is avoiding negative actions like stealing, lying, killing, using other people for your own purposes, getting obliteratingly drunk, although maybe that could be useful at times, and other actions that are negative and destructive. So it's avoiding those, and you reject them like poison, and you undertake the positive actions, generosity, helping others, preserving life, telling the truth in ways that are useful, and all the other things that one can do to be of benefit to the world and other sentient beings. And then in also undertaking this, you apply the three supreme methods. Remember, when you sit down to practice, the first thing you do is you generate the wish for all beings to be happy and free from suffering, and the four immeasurables. May they not be separated from the great happiness, devoid of suffering, that's joy, and then equanimity. And that's the first of the three supreme methods. The second is that you rest your mind in reality, shunyata, here, devoid of this and that. Real, the real. You're changing your allegiance from the stories, the myths that you have believed to what is actually real. And the third method, again, is for others giving away the merit. You give it away because there's nothing to possess. In fact, the idea of possession is selfishness and anti-dharma. And then the third aspect of transcendent discipline is bringing benefit to others. Again, that's the three supreme methods. That's the way you bring benefit to others. The third transcendent virtue, paramita, is patience, kshanti in Sanskrit. And it's the patience to bear hardships for the Dharma, the patience to face the profound truth without fear, and it's patience when being wronged, when people are hurting you. You just let it go. When you're attacked, robbed, defeated, treated badly, lied about, you respond positively with loving kindness and compassion, which counteracts the evil to the extent that you can. And if you lose patience and give way to anger, it says this over and over again in the teachings. A single fit of rage can destroy the effects of good actions you have accumulated for a long, long time. Yeah, Atisha says this in The Way of the Bodhisattva. No evil is there similar to hatred, no austerity to be compared with patience. Steep yourself, therefore, in patience, and always urgently with zeal. And when you are steeping yourself in patience, what it means is that you are ignoring these attacks, and instead you are relating accurately, with intelligence, with open-heartedness. And that doesn't mean foolishness. That means awareness and responsiveness to whatever the world is presenting. says, tame your mind with the Dharma so that you don't give way to anger and hatred. Taking the love and compassion of Bodhichitta as your basis. Without any doubt, this is the most essential point of all practices. So coming back to Shunyata, when we rest here in this awareness, what lights this awareness is the beauty of this world. We begin to notice it. It isn't just empty of I and other. It's also full of the visual colors, shapes, and forms, sounds, the tactile sensations of the body, all of this stuff, including your mental events, tastes, smells. All of this is gorgeous. It arises so vividly, luminously. The word they use for this is that within emptiness, when you come and you give rid of the concepts, especially the concepts of I and other, and everything that constellates around them, all the good and bad things, when that goes, then the world is seen as extraordinarily beautiful, and the term that they use in Sanskrit is Prabhasvara, in Tibetan is Ursel, which means, both of which mean luminous. This world is extremely luminous. So, you tame your mind with the Dharma, taking love and compassion of Bodhichitta as your basis. So this is the love and compassion of awakened mind. Awakened mind has these two aspects especially, and more, but the two main aspects that go together are emptiness, empty of I and other, empty of all the neurosis, the hatred, the passion, the wish that things were otherwise, that it constellates around I and other, empty of that, and full of enormous appreciation for the beauty of this world as it arises now. So we give up the self-indulgence of wallowing in wishing things were otherwise, which leads to depression, anger, hatred, and all the rest. And we rest our minds just in this. We come back to it again and again. So finally, second, patience to bear hardships for the Dharma. You could ignore heat, cold, and other difficulties. The ancient Kadampas, what happened was that when Atisha went to Tibet around 1200, his disciples there called themselves the Kadampas. And here's what it says: base your mind on the Kadampas say, base your mind on the Dharma, base your Dharma on a humble life. Means don't, aspire to becoming president of the United States. Base your humble life on the thought of death, and base your death on an empty, barren hollow. So it's complete, utter reality without depression. So, and then he goes into a long thing here about recommending retreat. This comes off back and forth here. Retreat, for those who haven't done it. You go off alone, and I recommend, if you are interested in retreat, talk to me or Michael, and we will counsel you about it. But what retreat means is going off alone without the reminders and triggers of your normal self. Trungpa Rinpoche called it the opportunity to be with your own mind. And that's really what retreat is all about. Ideally, you go off in isolation. Ideally, you go to a place that is unfamiliar, not your own home, because your own home is full of all kinds of mental triggers, habitual reminders that trigger you back into your normal neurotic state of mind and fantasies. You're welcome, Sarah, for whatever it might be. And you go off and you do nothing, as Trungpa Rinpoche said, but eat, shit, sleep, and meditate. Now, we have to be careful about this, and because it can be dangerous. I was telling about the first retreat that I ever did. It was very early on. And I went to a cabin up at 11,500 feet. Not a great idea. I was about 10 or 20 miles from the nearest human being. And I was alone there for 3 weeks, and it was starting to snow. By the time I left, there were 7 feet of snow. Luckily, I'd gone out mid-retreat, and I asked my friend David to bring me some snowshoes. And I went back into retreat in the middle of the retreat at midnight in the moonlight on snowshoes. I came out in 7 feet of snow. We don't let people do that anymore. But we do have retreat centers. There's a beautiful retreat center in southern Colorado called Dorje Kyungsong. It's gorgeous. And there are wonderful retreat facilities at Karme Choling in Vermont. And there are retreat facilities in Halifax and in other places. And these are very simple cabins. And you go and you take some food, and maybe you have some food that you store in a central location, and you can go and get it at night when nobody's around. And you live in this cabin very, very simply with just your bedding, your shrine, your meditation cushion, and any other things you might take for inspiration. And we would talk about that before you went into retreat. And in retreat, you do a minimum of 6 to 8 hours a day of meditation practice. That's the standard. And you can do more. And you do nothing but eat, shit, sleep, and meditate. You might be taking baths out on the front porch with water you poured out of a jug and heated up on your propane gas ring. It's very, very simplistic. And it can be very easy. Although the difficulties that arise are really not going to be physical. They're going to be, if there are any, psychological. And I recommend retreat highly. It's an opportunity to be alone with your mind in a way you've never been before. A lot of people say, oh, I cut myself off from others and I've been in retreat. And what they've really been doing is they've been doing projects. They've been doing knitting, or they've been drawing art, or they've been writing a book, as well as meditating. When you go off into retreat, there are no other projects. You just meditate and do everything that supports that. And I do recommend it, and he talks about it a lot in this chapter. He talks about it also in this is very extreme version of retreat, because he's talking about it in the Tibetan style of the 19th century, when there were no airplanes, trucks, cars, electricity. People that didn't live that way in Tibet then. I remember Trungpa Rinpoche describing seeing the first airplane in the 1950s. He had never seen one before. And there was no running water where he lived, no electric or any other kind of heat except for what you burned. Living in Tibet was very ascetic. And then there are others, but great teachers in Tibet have practiced retreat a lot. And there are lots of stories about that. He says, Patrul says, it is therefore of fundamental importance to cast to the winds all the cravings of ordinary life and to practice without caring about heat, cold, or any other difficulties. And he uses the example of Milarepa and others. Milarepa went off and practiced in a cave and with no food even. But we're not going to do that. Then he ate nettle soup and actually turned green. And that's why he's always green in the tankas, although sometimes it comes across as blue. So, and then there's the patience to face the profound truth without fear. The most pernicious act you can accomplish is to reject the Dharma. So you try to grasp the true meaning of the teachings without giving rise to negative, critical, fearful, wrong views. You try and see it simply, accurately, completely, all the teachings. The fourth virtue is transcendent diligence, which is Shila, and there are 3 kinds of this: armor-like, inaction, and diligence that can't be stopped. The armor-like teachings, armor-like diligence is where you go through great trials. Great teachers have gone through great trials, difficulties, and you can follow in their footsteps. We don't really cultivate this, but sometimes it just comes up. that life becomes very difficult, and we continue to practice right through those difficulties. It says, we have all the freedoms and advantages of a human existence. We have met with an authentic spiritual teacher, lineage, and are receiving profound instructions. We should vow from the bottom of our hearts to practice the true Dharma and be prepared to accept hardships, take on heavy burdens, and risk life and limb without a care for our flesh and blood. That's Patrul for us. We're going to be safe. But we are going to be pure. And when you go into retreat, you take no forms of entertainment. There's no writing, no journaling. You take nothing to read for entertainment, even the Dharma. You just take something to read, maybe a page at night for inspiration. No forms of entertainment. You just eat, shit, sleep, and meditate, as Rinpoche said. So, diligence in action. You do not wait a second to practice. There's a saying in Buddhism, it's actually, for those of you doing Nundro, it's in that wonderful essay. It's repeated many places. Meditate as though your hair were on fire. So you don't wait another second. Totally abandon worldly activities and devote yourself to the practice of Dharma right now. Otherwise, you will never find the time and be spurred on by the thought of impermanence. And then there is diligence which cannot be stopped. You don't feel satisfied with having done a little retreat or some practices. Vow to practice for as long as you live, until you have attained perfect Buddhahood. And it's within everybody's capacity to do this. You try to make greater and greater efforts each day. It has to come out of genuine inspiration, though, not because you're beating yourself. So you practice the Dharma with diligence from the depth of your heart without ever feeling you have done enough. Generally speaking, whether you attain Buddhahood or not depends solely on your diligence. The more you get into this, the more diligent you will become. It just happens. Jigme Lingpa, who lived in the 18th century, I think, famous after Longchenpa, probably the most famous Tibetan. He says, no intelligence, no power, no wealth or strength can help someone without diligence. He is like a boatman whose boat has everything but oars, he who lacks diligence. So make your mind like a good bowstring, neither too loose nor too tight. It will get you nowhere to practice sporadically, only when you have time. And finally, the fifth paramita, the fifth transcendent virtue, is concentration, samadhi in Sanskrit, Dingedzin in Tibetan. And to start with, again, he says, give up distractions and go to a solitary place. I can't tell you how powerful it is to be truly alone, those of you who have never done it. And I recommend, most people in this world have never, ever been truly alone. They say, oh, I went off by myself, but what they were doing was gardening or making art or writing their book. But to be truly alone, you're doing nothing but watching your breath or practicing, sitting, cooking your dinner, taking care of your body and your clothes as necessary. This utter simplicity and the utter minimum. So, giving up distractions is an amazing experience, and I encourage you but only in conversation with me or Michael or someone like us. You have to have permission to go into retreat. He says, whatever is brought together will fall apart. Understand the futility of becoming attached to ephemeral loved ones and friends, and always remain in solitude. Now that's pretty extreme. Not always for us. We're going to go back and forth. Personally, I've never done more than a 1-month retreat, and I've done quite a few of those. and it's very powerful. I was telling someone, I don't think I did it today, that I always felt very lonely, especially at the beginning of retreat. And I always put up a sign on the wall that said, "Nothing could be sadder than a glass of wine alone. Loneliness is just a waste of your time." It's a line from a Rolling Stones song. And I used to put that up on the wall when I went into retreat. So amassing wealth, guarding it, and making it grow will wear you out. Understanding that riches bring unending ruin and destruction. So to pursue riches is a pointless, never-ending, and fruitless task that will not bring you happiness and completion. So while you still have the chance, use the few possessions you have in this life to provide for future lives. Be content with a meager amount of food and just enough clothing to keep out the wind. That's Patrul. You don't have to be that extreme, but you get the idea. He says there is no end to trivial pursuits involving commerce, agriculture, industry, academia, entertainment of all kinds. These trivial pursuits keep you constantly busy for inconsequential goals, and suddenly you wake up and you find, I'm 79 years old. Where did it go? Just like that. All gone. So abandon all these endless activities and distractions like so much spit in the dust. Leave your homeland behind and head for unknown lands. Head for a retreat cabin. But again, only under the guidance of an accomplished person or a person accomplished in sending people into retreat. Just like Jetsun Milarepa. You will find that in places where you feel lonely, concentration arises. Absolutely. The silence, the having nothing to do except to sit down and meditate. Very powerful. Again, an experience that 99.9% of the human population has never had. Secluded forests and the like. Awareness is naturally clear, and concentration develops by itself in retreat. And attachment, hatred, and all the negative emotions that you had tried in vain to control in places bustling with activity will diminish by themselves simply because you are now in solitude and you have no one to hate. Finally, actual concentration of three kinds. Practiced by ordinary beings, for a concentration which clearly discerns, and the excellent concentration of the Tathagata. By ordinary beings, when you're attached to the experiences of bliss, clarity, and absence of thought in meditation, and intentionally seek them, then your practice is covered by this appreciation of bliss, clarity, and absence. This is ordinary beings. Clearly discerning concentration, which is a step up, when you're free from any attachment to meditative experiences and are no longer fascinated by concentration, but you still cling to emptiness, this reality. It's very good to do that at this stage. You remember to come back again and again. This is our practice, all of ours, to come back again and again to this. And this is the middle stage of concentration. You still cling to emptiness as an antidote, and that's all right. That's the middle stage, and it will pass by itself. And the third, and the excellent concentration of the Tathagata, is when you're free from any attachment to meditative experiences and are no longer fascinated by concentration, but still cling to emptiness, but remain in a concept-free concentration on the nature of reality, because it's what's real. You've gotten past trying to get some benefit out of it, and instead you're dwelling in emptiness because there's no choice. It's what's real. Everything else is imagination. And when you practice concentration, Patrul says, and we're doing this really, it's important to sit in the 7-point posture of Vairochana or Vairochana, however you want to pronounce his name. So here are the points. Your body is straight so that the channels, there are 3 main channels in your body and then gazillions of others going all the way down to the tips of your fingers and toes. The 3 main channels go from roughly up in your head, I'm not going to go into detail, down through the chakras. There are 4 main chakras, down to the secret center, 4 finger breadths below the navel. And they carry winds, prana in Sanskrit, lumta in Tibetan. And these are the winds of life. And these winds carry essences, bindu in Sanskrit, sa in Tibetan. And these little essences, they're like little beads that are carried by the winds throughout your body and enliven you. So when the energies are straight, when you have good posture and the channels are straight, the 3 main channels, then the mind is straight. So you sit cross-legged in the Vajra posture, or if you prefer in a chair. Vajra posture might be full lotus, but you don't have to. You can sit in half lotus or simply with your legs crossed. Or you can sit in a chair. Sit up straight, and then he says in this description, with your neck bent slightly forward so your entire spine is aligned. You want your spine to be aligned. Place your hands in the equanimity mudra, which is like a begging bowl, or place them palms down on your knees, as we do. Let the tip of your tongue gently touch the upper palate, up here, up behind your front teeth, and you breathe through your nose. Keep your arms relaxed with your elbows off the ribs, so your hands are on your thighs and your elbows are by your side. Open your eyes and gaze toward the tip of your nose if you wish, or if you prefer, close your eyes, or you can just gaze at almost anything. But hold your gaze steady and breathe naturally. These are the 7 points of posture of Vairochana. And it's said that the mind rides the energies of the winds of your prana, like a rider rides a horse. Don't lie down or lean against anything, but sit up upright, your mind free from thought. This is if you can. If you have physical difficulties, you work with that. And you rest in equanimity, in a state where there is no grasping to anything. That is the essence of transcendent concentration. That's the 5th paramita. So Michael is going to take it from here, discussing the 6th and perhaps most important, prajna.
Okay, thank you, John. Just to echo what John said about retreat, it really is great practice. It really is an opportunity to become very familiar with how one's mind works. One recommendation I would make is if you've never done any kind of group retreat practice, and I know we've been talking some in our group here, doing a group retreat, that's a good way to start because it helps just to getting used to doing more intensive practice in terms of number of hours and amount of time than probably many of us are used to begin with. So I'm hoping we do a group retreat. If not, there are opportunities at Karma Choling and what's now called Drala Mountain Center to do week-long or even month-long Datun group retreat practices, which are really a good way to prepare for individual retreat. Not necessary, but I would say recommended. So the section that I'm going to be talking about is transcendent wisdom. This is what the paramita that Trungpa Rinpoche calls prajna, so you could think of this as prajna as well as wisdom. And this section begins by talking about 3 aspects in regard to prajna, of the 3 aspects being what are normally called the 3 prajnas. In this text, it says the wisdom that comes through hearing, the wisdom that comes through reflecting, and the wisdom that comes through meditation, or what Trungpa Rinpoche would call hearing, contemplating, and meditating. And what these three are is how prajna is practiced or how wisdom develops. It's what we are doing right now, or at least we should be doing, all of us, at least in terms of listening. Hearing is listening to all the words and understanding the meaning. This would also apply to reading. Straightforward enough, but the idea is to approach whatever we're studying, whatever we're hearing, listening to, reading, with an open mind. It's not a question of just trying to memorize and blind faith, but to really look into the meaning of the words and try to understand what we're being taught. Reflection, as it says in the text, is reviewing what's heard in your mind and clearly establishing the meaning through reflection, examination, analysis, and asking questions. Trungpa Rinpoche would talk about reflection or contemplating, as well as meditating, as connecting Dharma to our personal experience, that we don't see it as something out there, but come to realize this is true of our lives. We can see these things in our experience. And with reflection, Patrul Rinpoche emphasizes that we should make absolutely sure that when the time comes to practice in solitude, we're going to be able to manage on our own, that we know what we need to practice, and that we don't need to ask anyone to clarify certain points. And then finally, with meditation, we gain practical experience of what we've understood intellectually or conceptually. This is where the true realization of the natural state develops in us without any mistake. This is when we come to fully recognize what awareness is, what our basic goodness is. And by practical, it means concerned with the actual doing or use of something rather than theory or ideas. The idea, again, is that theory or ideas are helpful in pointing us in the right direction. But if we don't actually make the journey, if we don't actually take the step, then they're at most useless. With meditation in particular, and with hearing and reflecting, then, as the text says, certainty is born from within, because we see that it's true of us. We see that this is how things are. This is how we are. And with that, we're liberated from hesitations and doubts. So then again, as it says in the text, having first eliminated all doubts through hearing and reflection, we come to the practical experience of meditation and see everything as empty forms without substantiality. So again, John's already presented some things about shunyata and emptiness. I'll just add a couple of things in terms of the, from the philosophical schools of India and Tibet. First thing is to say that in talking about emptiness, we're not talking about a nothingness, that there's nothing there. What we're really talking about is a lack of true substance or the lack of true existence of something. And what's said in the Indian Pramana tradition is that to say something truly exists, has true substance, it would have to be permanent or unchanging, would be another word you could use. In other words, it always is what it is. That it's singular, that it's not made up of parts, but it is its own one thing. And that it's independent, that it doesn't rely on other causes and conditions to come about. If it did, then when the conditions change, it changes, and it could not be permanent, singular, or independent. And in the Mahayana Madhyamaka tradition, as well as somewhat in the Chittamatra, we could actually examine things to see whether they really are permanent, singular, and independent. So, for instance, there's a table in front of me. It's relatively solid, but not permanent. It's an old table. It's not as new and fresh as it once was. It's not singular in the sense that I can easily take it apart in my mind, and if I had the right tools, I could do it right now. So then if I were to take the legs off, it would become a floor, essentially. If I took the top off, then the legs would just be sticks. So again, there's no table in any one of those things. It's dependent on being put together. And once it comes apart, there's no table in any one part of it. So it's not permanent, not singular, not independent. What makes it a table is that I label it that way and that I think of it that way. And I hope as we go along, we can say a few more things about looking at conceptual mind that will be helpful in terms of understanding perhaps something of emptiness. Ultimately, shunyata or emptiness is beyond concept, beyond reference point, but we have to talk about, we have to say something. So we use reference points to try to point at the unfindability of true nature, true substance in things. And it's also said that along with emptiness, that yet there is appearance. And by appearance tends to make us think purely of the visual. But really, it's talking about the appearance to any one of the senses, although, again, the visual sense is the one that most commonly is used in terms of metaphors and similes. The other thing I'll just say about conceptual mind is that, again, if we can remember from the reading that we did of Patrul Rinpoche's book, A Mind at Ease, that the conceptual mind tends to work in categories, and something is or isn't something. Shunyata is beyond being is or isn't. It's beyond existing and non-existing. So just going from one extreme to another doesn't help in terms of understanding Shunyata. Seeing that our mind does that we want to fit things into categories and label things in a certain way, that is helpful because we realize that it's what the traditional texts call conceptual imputation, that we project onto things labels and ideas about their existence that are projections. They're not really in the things themselves. A table never calls itself a table. We do. So the 8 similes are all examples of how something could appear yet not truly exist. And the first one, so there are 8 similes, and they're all somewhat different, or some of them are somewhat different than the others. The first is the simile of a dream, where in a dream we see things that seem to be external objects, and we see ourselves as subject doing things or being affected by things in a dream. And yet, in reality, it's delusion. It's all mind. There is nothing in a dream that isn't mind. This is an example that's used in the Chittamatra mind-only school for actually our waking experience as well. That in fact, whatever we encounter, whatever we experience is there's no phenomena that's separate from mind. That we have the appearance of external objects, but what we're really perceiving, what we're really encountering is our own mind. And we don't often think of it that way because we tend to think of mind in a very narrow, limited sense, just what we think, what we intend, what we feel. But in reality, mind includes all of our sensory experience as well. All of that is the display of awareness. And when we start dividing things up into subject and object, we begin to shut down or bind the mind, bind awareness by getting caught up in concepts of duality and so on. So again, the example of a dream is that there's the appearance of external objects, and there's an appearance of a self in relation to those objects, but in reality, it's all mind. The second example is a magic show. And the idea here is that things appear due to causes and conditions that create appearances. But if we understand the dependent nature of things, that things come together as a result of causes and conditions, we see them in a different way. So, for instance, if you've ever seen a magic trick, like a card trick or something, and all of a sudden somebody shows you the card that they should not have been able to find, or it shouldn't appear where it does, it looks magical, it looks mysterious, it looks, there's certainly in the appearance of something really unusual happening. If we can convince them to show us how they did the trick, then we understand that it's created by causes and conditions. And this would be true of any magician's trick. But the appearance doesn't change. It still appears like the card comes out of nowhere, or they turn the card over when they shouldn't have even known where it was, or whatever the trick is. The appearance stays the same. But we come to realize that it's a false appearance, that it's created by causes and conditions. The example of a visual aberration is an example of things when it appear where there really is nothing. And the classic example in the traditional text is to press on the eyeball so you see a double image. You could do it right now if you want to see 2 computers. Yeah, there we go. But so again, something seems to be there as a perception, but it's not real. It's not actually there. Similar with mirage, the next example. It's a similar idea as with a visual aberration. The difference here is with the the visual aberration, like pressing on the eyeball, or there's other examples in traditional texts. Like apparently, if you have jaundice, you'll see white things as yellow, so you'll believe that a snow mountain is yellow instead of white. All of those are kind of more what we would normally take to be as internal kinds of perceptions. A mirage seems to be more external, in a relative sense it is. But it's the same idea. It's that something appears to be a certain way, but that's not truly how it is. The example of an echo is an example of something that really has no real meaning. It's just sound. And that we could look at sound and say, is it outside? Is it inside? Is sound in our head? Does it come from me into this computer, out to you? Where does it come in between? How does sound become mind? Where does mind stop and sound begin? In the same way, we could ask that question about any visual object, such as a mirage, or an object that's in front of us right now. Is the object truly external? Where does mind stop and the object begin? And if we really look at our experience, we realize that ultimately it's unfindable. The example of a city of Gandharvas. Gandharvas are out of the Hindu tradition. They're celestial musicians that play music to the gods, and so they have no real. It's a truly illusory experience, and yet there's sound and there's appearance. Then there's the example of seeing a reflection, like in a mirror, where things appear, but they have no reality of their own. Even though sometimes we'll talk about, the mirror as that's me. It's really a reflection. It's not the same thing. It's another example with the reflection in a mirror of how things are reflected by mind, and how all that we appear, all that we see, in actuality, there is no phenomena separate from mind, that all appearances are a reflection of mind, or appearance of mind. So, if we see all objects of perception in this way, in other words, that things appear, yet they're empty of true substance, we come to understand, as it says in the text, all these appearances are false by their very nature. When we look into the nature of the subject that perceives them, which is the mind, those objects that appear to it don't stop appearing, but the concepts that take them as having true existence subside. And it says to leave the mind in the realization of the nature of reality, empty, clear like the sky, is transcendent wisdom. So again, the idea of prajna, wisdom, it's that ability to be fully present in our experience and have some understanding of the changing, dependent, not singular nature of things, that things around us are constantly changing, that what seems to be a creation of some kind of stability to our experience is mental imputation. And so, and I will say that in all the different schools of Buddhist philosophy that look at the nature of perception, they all begin with the practice of meditation. They all begin with looking at our experience right in the moment. Because if we stay on the level of conceptuality, we're staying on a level that's very general. And on that general level, we tend to take things to be real in a way that they're not. So again, I think I would ask everyone to just for a moment, take a good seat and straighten your back. Maybe just work with the breath for a little while. Allow ourselves to slow down, let go of thoughts. So, as we rest in present mind, If I were to ask you what I'm doing right now, you'd say that I'm holding up a book. And I would say the same thing. But in the moment of present experience, what I'm seeing is the front of the book. And what you're seeing is the back of the book. So even though it seems like we're all agreeing on the same thing, in the moment, our experience perceptually are actually very different. If I turn the book around, now I'm looking at the back of the book, and you're looking at the front. What creates the sense of continuity, what creates the sense of a seeming sameness, even though our perceptual experiences are actually very different, is that we applied the label book, the concept book, to experience. In the same way, if I were to ask you right now to think of a chair, you'd have no trouble doing that. But if we were to actually share what kind of image comes to mind, every one of us would probably be thinking about a very different kind of chair based on our personal experiences. Again, what makes the idea of chair seem real is that when that conceptual mind tends to take what it thinks of as being real. Right now, none of us, well, most of us probably aren't actually seeing a chair. Perhaps some of us are. There again, what seems to be common experience isn't as common as we think. But we all have some idea of what a chair is. But for each one of us, that's somewhat different. So this is what's meant by a generality, that each one of us has a general idea of a chair. If we were to see an actual chair and actually be present with that experience, we would see just that chair. So again, the idea is that the conceptual mind works on a very generalized level. But the problem, one of the problems is that we tend to take concepts often as being more real than they are. So for instance, just saying chair, there's not much attachment probably to that. But if we start thinking about my expensive chair, or my expensive chair, my favorite chair, my most comfortable chair, we begin to, or the chair that I inherited from my parents before they passed. All of those things, we start having more and more attachment, more and more involvement, you could say, emotionally with the concept of chair. So it's, again, this is just, I'm trying to just get at some of the different ways that we could come to see something of what emptiness is and what happens when we take concepts to be real. And again, the idea is that there are appearances, but they don't exist in exactly the way that we think that they do. We take things to be more solid, real, having more substance, more continuity than they really do. And again, as it says in the text, to leave the mind in the realization of the nature of reality, in the present moment, just things as they are, empty yet clear like the sky, is transcendent wisdom. So the point is that appearances will continue, but appearances aren't the problem. There's Tilopa, in working with his student Naropa, said it's not appearances that bind you, it's your attachment to appearances that bind you. And the reason we become attached to appearances is because we take them to be real in a way that they are. It's our attachment to things being real, unchanging, independent, singular, that leads to the kleshas, because we become possessive, or we reject, wish to push away, feel threatened by something. So that's as much as I want to say right now about emptiness or shunyata. Hopefully this is at least a little bit helpful in trying to get some grasp on what's ultimately ungraspable. It's immediate, direct experience, beyond concepts, beyond reference points. And so we could just, hopefully could just, in moments, I think sometimes we realize this. The next section, he goes through all of the paramitas, and the point here is that it's prajna, it's wisdom that actually renders the paramitas transcendent. The point here is that on this level, any activity is the practice of all the paramitas at once, that they're not separate. And he gives a couple of examples of this. For instance, the Buddha teaching Dharma as generosity, that the Dharma is taught without seeking gain, honor, or self-aggrandizement as discipline, that the repetition of points is done without becoming fatigued or without being daunted by difficulty as patience, the teaching without laziness or procrastination as diligence, and so on. In the same way, he goes into the example of the practice of generosity and ties generosity to the other paramitas. In particular, for instance, not letting yourself get distracted by other thoughts in an act of generosity is concentration. And knowing that the three elements of subject, object, and action, subject, object, and action have no intrinsic reality as wisdom. This is what we're taught, what Trungpa Rinpoche teaches is a threefold purity. No gift, no giver, no recipient. And that comes from the realization of wisdom, or shunyata. Then there, starting on page 253, there are 3 verses by 3 different teachers, great teachers of the past. And I'm just going to read them because they're really full of wisdom, and each one of them could be a talk unto itself. So the first one is by Milarepa. Perfectly give up belief in any true existence. There is no other generosity than this. Perfectly give up guile and deceit. There is no other discipline. Perfectly transcend all fear of the true meaning. There is no other patience. Perfectly remain inseparable from the practice. There is no other diligence. Perfectly stay in the natural flow. There is no other concentration. Perfectly realize the natural state. There is no other wisdom. Perfectly practice Dharma in everything you do. There are no other means. Perfectly conquer the 4 demons. There is no other strength. Perfectly accomplish the twofold goal. There is no further aspiration. Recognize the very source of negative emotions. There is no other primal wisdom. So there, as I said, that verse alone could be a talk or several talks. But just to bring out a couple of points, to give up belief in true existence, give up guile and deceit. Giving up belief in true existence is what we've been talking about in regard to shunyata. If there is no belief in true existence, and if we're able to see egolessness of self and egolessness of other, there's no need for guile and deceit. Perfectly stay in the natural flow is another way of talking about concentration and not being distracted from just the natural flow of awareness, which is continuous. Our awareness of our awareness is not continuous. Our recognition of awareness is not continuous, but we're always aware of something. The problem is that often our awareness becomes bound up in conceptual mind. Perfectly realize the natural state. This is what John talked about in terms of the luminosity of nowness and presence of nowness. When it talks about conquer the 4 demons, I thought this meant the 4 maras, and I was glad to look up. There's a glossary in the back, and anytime you come across something like 4 demons or the twofold goal, do look it up in the glossary if you're curious, because there are definitions back there. The conquering the 4 demons are the 4 maras, which you can read about in the glossary and footnotes that it refers to. The twofold goal, I thought meant twofold egolessness, but actually refers to the benefit of self and other, which is the nature of Dharma practice altogether. It benefits us and it benefits other. And obviously, ideally, we're working toward the attainment of full enlightenment so that we're fully benefited and able to fully benefit others. The second verse is by Atisha, where he's asked what is the best of all elements of the path. And again, I'll read the verses because these were wonderful. I actually have them printed out, so I want to find some way to refer to them from time to time. But he's asked what is the best of all elements of the path. The best scholar is one who has realized the absence of any true existence. So again, we're back to the nature of wisdom, prajna, and shunyata. The best monk is one who has tamed his own mind. The best quality is a great desire to benefit others. The best instruction is always to watch the mind. The best remedy is to know that nothing has any inherent reality. Again, wisdom, shunyata. The best way of life is one that does not fit with worldly ways. Again, giving up the temptations of the worldly dharmas, gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and insignificance, and pleasure and pain, which was said earlier in the text. Our involvement with that can be endless. The best accomplishment is a steady lessening of negative emotions. The best sign of practice is a steady decrease of desires. The best generosity is non-attachment. The best discipline is to pacify the mind. The best patience is to keep a humble position. The best diligence is to give up activities. The best concentration is not to alter the mind. And the best wisdom is not to take anything at all as truly existing. So there's actually a footnote with that one line, the best concentration is not to alter the mind. And I hope people are looking at the footnotes, because some of them actually bring up some really profound points. The point there is just letting things be as they are, not trying to stop thoughts, not trying to create thoughts, just what we talk about in terms of meditation. The best remedy, where he says the best remedy is to know that nothing has any inherent reality. Why is that? Because when we come to realize that, we don't get caught up in the kleshas. We don't take things to be real in a way that they're not. We don't get caught up in seeming reality, which just leads to further confusion, further struggle, and endless spinning in samsara. Then there's another verse by Jigme Lingpa, who John talked about earlier, one of the great Nyingma teachers. Transcendent generosity is found in contentment. Transcendent generosity is found in contentment. Just being okay with ourselves as we are, things as they are, appreciating what is just as it is. Its essence is simply letting go. That's the essence of generosity. Discipline is not to displease the three jewels. The best patience is unfailing mindfulness and awareness. Unfailing mindfulness and awareness, so that we don't give in to aggression, because we both have some stability through our mindfulness practice and some awareness of causes and conditions, so that we don't get caught up in limited points of view that cause us to be caught up in aggression. Diligence is needed to sustain all the other perfections. There needs to be some energy, we need some effort to our practice. Concentration is to experience as deities all the appearances to which one clings. There's another footnote there, but basic idea is to see all appearances as wisdom. Wisdom is the self-liberation of grasping and clinging. In it there is neither thinking nor a thinker. It is not ordinary. It is free from fixed convictions, and is free of reference points, free of ideas, free of labels. It is beyond suffering. It is supreme peace. So all three of those verses are by Milarepa, Atisha, and Jigme Lingpa. Any one of them we could read before beginning a practice if you want, and just contemplate those if you wish. They're great. He also has a very brief verse from Saraha, which talks about the combination of compassion and emptiness, because he says, to summarize in a nutshell, the whole vast path of the Bodhisattva teachings, including the 6 transcendent perfections, could be summarized in its entirety as emptiness of which compassion is the very essence. So again, emptiness of which compassion is the very essence. This is absolute bodhicitta. This is, you could call Tathagata Garbhas, you could call Buddha nature. This is fully realized basic goodness. And the point that the Saraha verse makes is that at this point, we're not, he says, without compassion, the view of emptiness will never lead you to the sublime path. Yet meditating solely on compassion, you remain within samsara. So how could you be free? But he who comes to possess both of these will neither in samsara nor in nirvana dwell. So without compassion, we'll always have some kind of antagonistic I and other relationship with the world. So there's no way that it can lead to the sublime path. Yet with compassion alone, without wisdom, is also not a complete path. We need them both together, and ultimately realizing both, its entirety, emptiness of which compassion is the very essence. That's absolute bodhicitta. And again, he goes on to talk about a conversation with Atisha, with his student Drone Tonpa, where Drone Tonpa asks, what is the ultimate of all the teachings? Of all the teachings, the ultimate is, again, emptiness of which compassion is the very essence. Atisha goes on to say, it's like a powerful medicine, a panacea that can cure every disease in the world. And just like that powerful medicine, realization of the truth of emptiness, the nature of reality, is the remedy for all the different negative emotions. Again, the negative emotions arise because we take things to be real, and we take ourselves to be real as an ego. in a way that we're not. It begins with a very fundamental confusion or misperception. Actually, the dialogue between Dron Tunpa and Atisha goes on for a little bit, because Dron Tunpa says, why is it then that so many people who claim to have realized emptiness have no less attachment and hatred? And Atisha's answer is because their realization is only words. It's not a real transformation, a real change in being, a real change in outlook. Don Trumpa asks, how can every element of the path be included within the realization of emptiness? And Atisha's answer is, if you truly realize emptiness, you become free of attachment. It's complete letting go. And as you feel no craving or desire for anything within or without, you always have transcendent generosity. Being free of grasping and attachment, you're never defiled by negative actions. You always have transcendent discipline. And he goes on through the rest of the paramitas. Don Trumpa asks them, do those who have realized the truth become Buddhas simply through the view of emptiness and meditation? And Atisha answers, of all that we perceive as forms and sounds, there is nothing that does not arise from the mind. So again, this is a statement that is in accord with the Chittamatra or mind-only view, that there's nothing we experience that isn't a reflection of mind. And again, to understand that, we really need to go beyond thinking of mind as just thinking mind, conscious mind in the sense of intending and feeling, but look at the totality of what we are aware of in any moment of experience. To realize that mind is awareness indivisible from emptiness is the view. Awareness indivisible from emptiness is the view. So for awareness, we could also say this is luminosity, we could say clarity, we could talk about the knowing quality of mind, not knowing in the sense of facts, but just knowing directly, direct experience. Keeping this realization and in mind, keeping this realization of mind at all times and never being distracted from it is the meditation. So again, it's resting in the natural state of awareness, indivisible from emptiness, and not being distracted from that. And then to practice the two accumulations as the magical illusion, is the action. So the two accumulations are the accumulation of wisdom and the accumulation of merit through activity in the world. As John was talking about before, refraining from negative actions, engaging in positive actions, and practicing the other five paramitas. He says, if you make a living experience of this practice, it will continue in your dreams, and he goes on to say it'll be at the moment of death, and then into the bardo, and with that you'd have supreme attainment. So again, awareness indivisible from emptiness is the view. Awareness emptiness, you could say, or clarity emptiness, or that the meditation is to rest in this realization of mind at all times and not be distracted from it. And then to practice the two accumulations as illusory is action. He says that the 84,000 dharmas that the Buddha taught are thus all skillful means to cause the bodhicitta, emptiness of which compassion is the very essence, to arise in us. So again, this is the culmination of arousing bodhicitta, which is what this chapter and what we talked about last week as well have been all about. He goes on to talk about bodhicitta. He says the practices aren't very effective or ineffective without bodhicitta. As he says, unless you create the proper foundation with refuge and bodhicitta, however intensively you might be studying, reflecting, and meditating, it will be of no more use than building a 9-story mansion on a frozen lake in winter. So there's no real foundation for our practice without refuge and bodhicitta. Never undervalue, he says, never undervalue the refuge and bodhicitta practices. He talks about ways in which we can judge how we have made progress on the path. Whatever qualities you may feel you have acquired as progress on the path, whatever they may be, you can be certain that they are really true qualities if, as a result, the love and compassion of bodhicitta steadily continue to increase. However, if the effect is to decrease love and compassion, for instance, if we get caught up in arrogance or judgment, then you can be equally sure that what looks like a sign of success is in fact a demonic obstacle or a sign that we're following the wrong path. He says, in particular, authentic realization of the natural state cannot but be accompanied by extraordinary faith and pure perception to those who are more spiritually mature, and love and compassion to those who are less so. And then there's a quote, which I think we read once before, where Gampopa, I think it's either called Dakpo Rinpoche, but it's Gampopa. We talk about in the text. We read the four dharmas of Gampopa. He asks, when will I be ready to guide others? And Milarepa says, one day you will have an extraordinary clear vision of the nature of your mind, quite different from the one you have now, and free from any kind of doubt. And with that, we see the teacher as Buddha, and we experience love and compassion toward all sentient beings. So the chapter ends with the exhortation to study, reflect, and meditate on the Dharma without separating, dissociating one from the other, and to do so on the firm basis of love and compassion, without first, and again, he emphasizes the importance of eliminating doubts and developing clarity through study. Without that, we won't be able to practice properly. The metaphor is of an armless man trying to climb a rock. And he says that eliminating doubts doesn't mean we have to know everything, but it just means whatever teachings we decide to practice, we know exactly what to do from beginning to end. And he talks about reducing them to their essence, that we train in bodhicitta with love and compassion for all living beings, that we make strenuous efforts in the two accumulations, accumulations of merit and the accumulation of wisdom. And again, that we dedicate all merit to all beings, while recognizing, from the point of view of wisdom, that all these things are illusory by nature, and that we should always seek the vital point of practice. That the purpose of practice is to be an antidote for negative emotions and ego clinging. When he quotes Milarepa, you can tell whether people know and practice the Dharma by whether it works as a remedy for their negative emotions and clinging. Again, there's just these exhortations over and over to that we should seek the teacher's instructions like a mother falcon seeking her prey, that we should listen to teachings like a deer listening to music, which is a nice peaceful image, by the way, that we should meditate on them like a dumb person savoring food. In other words, without distraction, without concept, just direct experience. We contemplate them like a northern nomad shearing sheep. I've never sheared a sheep, so I can't give you any more sense of what that particular metaphor is. But the last one, reaching the result, like the sun coming out behind the clouds, again is a metaphor for the luminosity of direct, present, concept-free experience, just clarity of mind, the clarity of awareness when it's fully realized and we fully rest in it. He says to churn together study, reflection, and meditation on the Dharma is an infallible, essential point, and that the result of study, reflection, and meditation should be a steady and real increase in love and compassion of bodhicitta, together with the steady and real diminution of ego clinging and negative emotions. And that this instruction on how to arouse bodhicitta, so not just this piece about wisdom, although this is the culmination of it, but everything we've read this week and last week, about, for instance, last week, the equality of self and other, exchanging self and other, and even seeing others, all the things about the different classifications of bodhicitta. All of this, this instruction on how to arouse bodhicitta is the quintessence of all Dharma teachings and the essential element of all paths, that we should put it into practice from the very depths of our heart. And so with that, I guess we can come to. So that's what I came prepared to say. And it's quite a bit, covering 6 paramitas in one talk, but we'd studied this before, so hopefully it wasn't too overwhelming. And we have a minute left. Although time is also a conceptual imputation, but still, in a relative sense, it makes a lot of it, it's there, so we have to deal with that too. Those verses that I read, I again, there's a lot of profundity in each one of them, and I only, talked about certain things out of each one that I, kind of struck me or I felt were relevant. But if there's something that strikes you as relevant in any of those verses, please bring it to discussion group if you're able to attend tomorrow night, if you like. Not a requirement, but a suggestion. Well, I guess with that, it's 9 o'clock, so we should actually close. So let me put up the chant, dedication of merit. So we'll close our study with the dedication of the merit generated through our practice and our study to the benefit of all sentient beings. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom, may the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled, may all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
John.
Michael.
That was
John,
great.
thanks so much.
John and Michael, thank you.
Thank you, John and Michael. Thank you, everyone.
Remember, if you can keep that realization in your dreams, that's a really good thing. So dream well tonight.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Night, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Michael.
Bye.